I'm Aaron, 38 male. I've lived in this house my entire life, first as a son and for the last decade as a caregiver. I work from a small office overlooking the backyard my father planted, running my own graphic design business, which gives me the flexibility to look after my mother, Helen. This old house isn't just wood and nails to me, it's a living album of every memory I hold dear. But I'm telling this story because I learned that to some people, even family, memories have a price tag, and they're willing to burn the whole album to cash it in. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Life had settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm, a delicate balance of work deadlines and my mother's needs. Helen, my mom, was 76. A retired librarian, she had spent her life surrounded by stories, but now her own was beginning to fray at the edges. Early onset dementia is a cruel thief. It doesn't just steal memories, it steals the person you love piece by piece, leaving behind a confusing echo. Most days were good. We'd sit in the garden, and she'd tell me stories from her childhood, her mind a clear pool of recollection. On other days, she wouldn't recognize the garden or me. On those days, my heart would break a little more. My graphic design business was stable, allowing me to work from the small upstairs bedroom I'd converted into a studio. The hum of my computer was the house's modern heartbeat, layered over the creaks and groans of a structure that had held my family for generations. My father passed away 12 years ago, and in his absence, the responsibility for mom and the house fell to me. My older sister, Chloe, had made it clear long ago that caregiving wasn't in her portfolio. Chloe, at 40, was a high-flying financial advisor in the city. Her life was a curated collection of sharp suits, expensive dinners, and talk of investments and yields. She visited on major holidays, sweeping in with a gust of expensive perfume and a box of chocolates, staying just long enough for a few photos and a thinly veiled assessment of the house's state of repair. "Aaron, that railing on the porch is looking a bit rickety," she'd say, not as an offer to help, but as a criticism. "You've got to maintain the property value." To Chloe, this house wasn't a home, it was an asset, an inheritance in waiting. Her visits became more frequent a few months ago, which I initially, naively, took as a sign of her growing concern for mom. She would bring fancy pastries mom couldn't eat because of her diet and would sit with her, holding her hand and speaking in a sweet, syrupy voice that always set my teeth on edge. "Oh, Mom, you look so tired," she'd coo. "Don't you worry about a thing. I'm here to help Aaron take care of everything." I saw these visits for what they were, reconnaissance missions. She'd walk through the house, her eyes scanning the walls, the floors, the furniture. She wasn't looking at our family photos, she was calculating square footage. She'd ask me questions disguised as casual conversation. "How are the property taxes these days? Have you had the foundation checked recently? You know, the market in this neighborhood is just skyrocketing." I tried to shut it down politely. "The house is fine, Chloe. Mom is comfortable here, that's all that matters." She would just smile, that tight, condescending smile of hers. "Of course, Aaron, her comfort is paramount. I'm just thinking about the future, about being practical." Practicality was Chloe's favorite word. It was her justification for everything. It was practical to put her career before family. It was practical to see a home as a line item on a spreadsheet. I, on the other hand, was the sentimental one, the dreamer who was too attached to a pile of bricks and mortar. The tension between us was an old, familiar song. We were two different people who happened to share parents. She chased numbers, I cherished memories. The last time she visited before everything fell apart, her behavior was particularly odd. She brought a thick stack of papers with her, just some financial stuff for Mom to look over, she'd said breezily. I was on a tight deadline with a client and she'd offered to sit with Mom while I worked. "You go on, little brother," she'd said, patting my arm. "I'll make sure Mom has her tea and a nice chat." I was hesitant, but a demanding client and a looming deadline pushed me upstairs. For 2 hours, I was immersed in color palettes and font pairings, the low murmur of Chloe's voice drifting up from the living room. It sounded soothing, reassuring. I felt a pang of guilt for my suspicion. Maybe she was finally stepping up. Maybe she was genuinely trying to help manage Mom's affairs, something I'd been struggling with. When I came back downstairs, Chloe was packing her briefcase. The papers were gone. Mom was sitting in her armchair by the window, looking confused and tired. A pen was on the side table next to her. "How was she?" I asked Chloe in a hushed tone as I walked her to the door. "Oh, she was great," Chloe said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We had a lovely chat, signed a few things to make managing her accounts easier for us. You know, practicalities." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "What did she sign, Chloe?" "Just standard power of attorney updates. It'll allow me to handle her banking from the city. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, you've got enough on your plate." She kissed me on the cheek, a dry, papery peck, and was gone before I could ask another question. I went back to Mom. She was holding a small, chipped teacup in her trembling hands. Chloe was here, she said, her voice distant. She had papers, she said. She said it was to help. I know, Mom, it's okay. I took the cup from her and held her hand. It felt cold. That night an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, a silent alarm I couldn't place. I chalked it up to my general distrust of my sister and the stress of my work. I reassured myself that even Chloe wouldn't cross certain lines. This was our mother. This was our home. I was a fool. I had mistaken a fragile piece for something permanent, not realizing that the floor beneath my feet was already gone, replaced by a trapdoor my own sister was about to spring. The weeks following Chloe's visit were a study in manufactured normalcy. She called more often, her voice dripping with artificial concern. How's Mom doing? Is she eating well? Are you remembering to give her the new medication at night? Each question felt less like a query and more like an interrogation, as if she were collecting data for a report. She was building a narrative, painting a picture of a doting daughter burdened by a less capable brother. I ignored the undertones, focusing on my routine. Client work, cooking, cleaning, and guiding Mom through the fog that was slowly thickening around her. The changes were subtle at first. A letter arrived from Mom's bank addressed to Chloe, care of her city address. When I called to ask about it, she was dismissive. Oh, that's just a statement. I'm consolidating her accounts to get a better interest rate. It's all part of the financial management I'm doing now. It's too complex for you to worry about. The condescension was infuriating, but what could I do? She had some form of power of attorney. I told myself it was for the best. I was terrible with finances. Then, a man in a polo shirt with a clipboard showed up at our door. He said he was from an appraisal company and had an appointment to assess the property. I told him he must have the wrong house. No, 212 Oak Street, right? He said, checking his notes. Appointment was made by a Chloe Anderson. My blood ran cold. There's been a mistake, I said firmly and shut the door. I called Chloe immediately, my hand shaking with anger. Why did you send an appraiser to the house, Chloe? Her sigh was heavy and theatrical, the sound of a martyr being questioned by a fool. Aaron, calm down, it's for insurance purposes. With property values going up, we need to make sure the house is properly insured. It's just due diligence. You're so overly dramatic. She had an answer for everything. Each explanation was plausible on its own, a single thread of logic that seemed sound. But when I wove them together, the pattern they formed was horrifying. Bank statements, property appraisals, these weren't the actions of a concerned daughter. These were the actions of a shark circling a property. She was liquidating Mom's life, and our home was the prime asset. The true betrayal, the moment the trapdoor finally swung open, came not with a phone call or a confrontation, but with a quiet, insidious visit. Chloe arrived one Tuesday afternoon unannounced. I was in my studio, headphones on, deeply focused on a logo design. I didn't even hear her come in. She must have used her old key. She didn't come to see me. She went straight for Mom. I found them an hour later in the sunroom. Chloe was sitting on the edge of Mom's armchair, her arm around her shoulders. A handsome, leather-bound folder was open on Mom's lap. Chloe was pointing to a line on a document, a pen in her other hand. And you just sign right here, Mom, Chloe was saying, her voice as sweet as poison. This just makes it official that I'm taking care of the house for you. It protects it. Mom looked bewildered. The sunroom, usually her favorite spot, seemed to close in on her. She looked from the paper to Chloe's smiling face, her brow furrowed in confusion. Protects it, she echoed. Yes, protects it from all the complicated taxes and things. This way, you and Aaron will always be safe here. It's just a formality. My voice cut through the air, sharp and loud. WH. At is that, what are you having her sign? Chloe flinched, her mask of sweetness dropping for a split second. She recovered instantly. Aaron, you startled me. It's nothing, just some estate planning documents. Very standard. I walked over and took the document from Mom's lap. The heading at the top was unmistakable, quitclaim deed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm not a lawyer, but I know what a deed is. It's ownership. You're trying to get her to sign the house over to you, I said, my voice dangerously low. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, standing up to face me. This is to put the house into a trust that I manage. It's the most responsible way to handle her assets given her condition. She said the word condition with a clinical detachment that made my skin crawl. She was using Mom's dementia as a tool, a key to unlock the biggest asset in her portfolio. She doesn't understand what she's signing, Chloe, you know that. She understands that she trusts me, Chloe retorted, her eyes flashing. She trusts her daughter to do what's best for the family. Unlike you, Aaron, I'm thinking about the long-term financial health of this family. This house is a gold mine sitting here doing nothing. It could be funding mom's long-term care in a top-quality facility. She's getting top-quality care right here, with her son in her own home. I was shouting now, the document shaking in my hand. Mom started to cry soft, confused sobs. "Please don't fight," she whispered. "I don't understand." That broke me. I looked from my weeping mother to my sister's cold, determined face. Chloe saw her opening. She knelt back down, her voice softening into a venomous lullaby. "It's okay, Mom. Aaron's just stressed. See, he's upsetting you. Just sign the paper and we can make all the stress go away. I'll handle everything." She tried to guide Mom's hand, the one holding the pen, toward the signature line. "Get out," I snarled. "Get out of this house right now." Chloe stood up, her face a mask of fury. "You can't throw me out. I'm trying to help. When you finally wake up and realize this house is a financial burden we can't afford, you'll thank me." "It's not a burden, it's our home, and it's her home. You will not steal it from her." She snatched her briefcase from the floor. "You're making a huge mistake, Aaron. You're too sentimental to see the big picture. But don't worry, I've already taken steps to protect Mom's interests. You'll see." With that, she stormed out, leaving a profound silence in her wake. I knelt by my mother's chair and gently took the pen from her hand. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. "I don't know what happened," she said. "It's okay, Mom," I whispered, holding her hand. "I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you." But as I sat there comforting her, a chilling realization washed over me. Chloe had said, "I've already taken steps." This wasn't her first attempt. This was just the first one I had caught. The stack of papers from her earlier visit, the ones she had Mom sign while I was working, what was in them? What had Mom already signed away with a simple, trusting stroke of a pen? I had a sickening feeling that the battle was already lost. I just hadn't realized it yet. The house felt different after that confrontation. The air was thick with unspoken fears. Every creak of the floorboards, every rattle of a window pane sounded like an omen. I watched over Mom more closely, my guilt a constant, heavy companion. I had let Chloe get to her. I had been so absorbed in my work that I'd left my vulnerable mother alone with a predator. The what-ifs haunted me. What if I hadn't come downstairs at that moment? Would Mom's trembling signature already be on that quitclaim deed? I tried to get information. I called Mom's bank, but they refused to speak with me, citing privacy policies. "We can only speak to the account holder or the individual with power of attorney," a Ms. Chloe Anderson, a polite but firm voice told me. I was locked out of my own mother's financial life. Every avenue I tried was a dead end, blocked by a wall of legal authority my sister had carefully constructed. For a month, an eerie quiet descended. Chloe didn't call, she didn't visit. It was a silence more menacing than any argument. It was the quiet of a predator waiting for its trap to spring. I existed in a state of suspended anxiety, checking the mail every day with a sense of dread, half expecting some official-looking envelope that would bring our world crashing down. Life went on as it has a way of doing even under the darkest clouds. I finished my design projects, I tended the garden with Mom on her good days, and I tried to push the feeling of impending doom to the back of my mind. I even started to hope that maybe my confrontation had scared Chloe off. Maybe she had realized she'd gone too far and had backed down. It was a foolish, desperate hope. The trap sprung on a Thursday. It was a beautiful autumn afternoon, the kind of day that should have been filled with the scent of fallen leaves and the warmth of the sun. I had just helped Mom settle in for her afternoon nap and was heading to the kitchen to make a cup of tea when I saw it. Taped to the front door was a large white envelope. It wasn't from the mail carrier, it had been placed there by hand. My heart seized in my chest. My hands were unsteady as I peeled the tape off the wood. The envelope was heavy, formal. My name was typed on the front, no postage, just my name. Inside was a stack of legal documents held together by a large clip. The cover letter was printed on the letterhead of a law firm I didn't recognize. The first sentence leaped off the page and slapped me across the face. "Ari, notice of eviction from the property at 212 Oak Street." Eviction, the word was nonsensical. How could I be evicted from my own home? I read on, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon, the words blurring together. "Pursuant to the transfer of ownership duly recorded on the new property owner, the Chloe Anderson Revocable Trust requires that you vacate the premises within 30 days. There it was, she had done it, the quitclaim deed. It must have been in that first stack of papers she'd had Mom sign, the one I hadn't seen. She had tricked our mother, a woman with a diagnosed cognitive impairment, into signing away her home. The document stated the deed was signed and notarized over a month ago, the day of that practical visit. She hadn't been trying to get a new signature when I caught her. She had probably been trying to get Mom to sign something else to solidify her position, or perhaps just putting on a show. The original betrayal had already happened. Attached to the notice was a copy of the new deed. There it was in black and white. My mother's signature, Helen Anderson, was on the bottom line. It was shaky, barely recognizable, a pale imitation of the firm, elegant script she once possessed. Next to it was the stamp and signature of a notary public. Chloe had come prepared. She had brought a notary with her that day, turning her act of deception into a legally binding transaction. I sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the papers scattered on the floor around me. A wave of nausea rolled through me. 30 days. I had 30 days to leave the only home I had ever known. 30 days to uproot my mother from the familiar surroundings that were her only anchor in a sea of confusion. Where would we go? How could I afford an apartment in this market, let alone one suitable for an elderly woman with dementia? My business was stable, but it wasn't lucrative. I lived a simple life because I had the house. Without it, I had nothing. Anger, hot and pure, burned through the shock. This wasn't just about a house or money. This was about cruelty. It was about Chloe's willingness to make her own mother homeless for profit. The woman who had given her life, who had read her bedtime stories in this very house, was now just a barrier to a real estate transaction. She was planning to sell the house, cash in, and probably stick Mom in the cheapest state-run facility she could find while pocketing the difference. The top-quality facility line had been a lie, a justification for her greed. I looked up the staircase toward the room where my mother was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world had just been stolen from her. A fierce, protective instinct rose in me, drowning out the despair. I was not going to let this happen. I would not let Chloe win. She might have a signed deed and a team of lawyers, but I had something she didn't, the truth. And I was standing in the home my father had built, the home he had intended for his wife to live in for the rest of her days. I gathered the papers, my hands no longer shaking. The shock had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This eviction notice wasn't an ending, it was a declaration of war. My sister had fired the first shot, believing me to be a sentimental pushover she could easily discard. She had severely underestimated me. I wasn't just my mother's caregiver, I was her protector. And I would fight for our home with everything I had. The eviction notice was a ticking clock, each second a reminder of the 30-day deadline looming over us. My first few days were a blur of panicked, fruitless activity. I called the law firm that sent the notice, only to be stonewalled by a paralegal who coolly informed me that their client, the Chloe Anderson Trust, would not be communicating with me directly and that all correspondence must go through them. I tried calling Chloe herself, but my calls went straight to voicemail. She had blocked my number. She had insulated herself behind a wall of legal professionals, leaving me to scream into the void. Despair was a tempting abyss. It would have been easy to fall into it, to start packing boxes and surrendering to the inevitable. Eve. Right time I looked at Mom, content in her familiar armchair, I felt a fresh wave of rage that pushed me forward. I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. My father's memory was what finally gave me direction. He was a meticulous man, a builder by trade who believed in contracts, blueprints, and having everything in writing. Paper never forgets, Aaron, he used to say. Our attic was a testament to his philosophy, a dusty archive of a life carefully lived. It was filled with boxes of old tax records, appliance warranties from the 1980s, and blueprints for every renovation he ever did on the house. If there was anything that could help me, it would be hidden somewhere in that organized chaos. Armed with a flashlight and a dust mask, I pulled down the attic ladder and ascended into the past. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and cedar. Beams of sunlight cut through the grime on the single window, illuminating dancing dust motes. It was daunting. There were dozens of boxes, all neatly labeled in my father's blocky handwriting. Finances 9095, household receipts, old photos. I didn't know what I was looking for. A will, an old deed, any piece of paper that could give me some leverage. I started with the box labeled House DEDS and TITLES. Inside, I found the original deed from when my parents bought the house in 1978. I found the document showing the mortgage had been paid off in 2005. But there was nothing that could override the new quitclaim deed Chloe had so cruelly obtained. For hours I sifted through files, my hope dwindling with each empty discovery. My clothes were covered in a fine layer of gray dust, and my spirit was beginning to match. I was surrounded by the history of our family, yet it seemed powerless to save our future. I sat down on an old wooden trunk, feeling utterly defeated. The eviction notice felt more real than ever, its legalistic words echoing in the silent attic. My flashlight beam caught the edge of a different box, one shoved far back under the eaves. It wasn't a cardboard box like the others. It was a metal footlocker, the kind the military uses. It wasn't labeled with my father's handwriting. Instead, it had a single faded label typed on an old label maker, family and estate. My heart gave a hopeful flutter. This was my mother's domain. She was the family archivist. The locker was locked, but the key was on a string tied to the handle, a classic mom move. I opened it. Inside, the documents were even more meticulously organized than my father's, separated by colored tabs. I saw our birth certificates, my parents' marriage license, and my father's death certificate. And then I saw a tab labeled Living Will and Estate Agreements. My fingers trembled as I lifted the file. It was thick. The first document was my father's will, which I'd seen before. It stated simply that everything went to my mother, standard stuff, but behind it was a folder I had never seen before. It contained a document that was professionally bound with a blue cover. The title on the front read, Life Estate Agreement. I lifted it out of the box, blowing a layer of dust off the cover. It was dated 8 years ago. I was 30 at the time and Dad had been gone for 4 years. I remembered this period well. Mom was still sharp as a tack, but she was starting to worry about the future. She was worried about the rising costs of property taxes and what would happen to the house and to me if something happened to her. Chloe was already living her high-powered life in the city and had made it clear she had no interest in the burden of the family home. Flipping open the cover, I saw what it was. It was a legal agreement drafted by an estate lawyer my parents had used for years. It was a binding contract between my mother, Helen Anderson, as the grantor, and me, Aaron Anderson, as the remainderman. I read through the legal language, my pulse quickening with every paragraph. The agreement was crystal clear. In exchange for my commitment to live in the house, maintain the property, and act as her primary caregiver for as long as she needed, my mother granted me a life estate. This meant I had the legal right to live in the house for the rest of my life. The ownership, the remainder interest, would only pass to her heirs, meaning both me and Chloe, after I had passed away. My mother retained ownership during her lifetime, but my right to live here was legally protected. She could not sell or transfer the property without my express written consent, as doing so would violate my life estate rights. And there at the end of the document were the signatures. My mother's clear and strong, mine a bit sloppy as it always is, and the signature and official seal of the lawyer who drafted it, as well as a notary public. It was ironclad, it was real. I leaned back against a dusty rafter, the document clutched in my hands like a holy text. This changed everything. Chloe's quitclaim deed was fraudulent, not just because she had coerced a mentally impaired woman into signing it, but because our mother no longer had the sole legal authority to sign that deed. She had signed away that right 8 years ago. The new deed was null and void. A slow smile spread across my face, the first genuine smile in weeks. Chloe, the financial wizard, the master of loopholes and legalities, had been outmaneuvered by a document from the past. She had been so focused on my mother's current vulnerability that she had completely forgotten about her past prudence. She didn't know this life estate agreement existed. She had assumed in her arrogance that she was dealing with a sentimental fool and a confused old woman. She had no idea we had a silent, powerful guardian hidden in a dusty box in the attic. The ticking clock of the eviction notice no longer sounded like a death knell. Now it sounded like a countdown to the moment I could wipe that smug, superior look right off my sister's face. I wasn't just going to fight the eviction, I was going to dismantle her entire scheme. The document in my hands wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a sword, and I was ready to use it. Finding the life estate agreement was like finding a weapon in the dark. My first instinct was to call Chloe and tell her I'd found it, to gloat, to declare her fraudulent deed worthless. But as the initial euphoria subsided, a more calculated strategy began to form. My father's voice echoed in my mind again, never show your whole hand until the last card is played. Chloe had operated with deception and surprise. It was time to give her a taste of her own medicine. A direct confrontation would only give her time to prepare, to find some other legal loophole to try and discredit the document or me. No, the best strategy was silence. I would let her believe she had won. I would let her proceed with her eviction, confident in her victory, and I would spring my trap at the last possible moment, in a forum where she couldn't lie or bully her way out of it. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best estate litigator I could find. His name was Marcus Thorne, a man in his late 50s with a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom and a bulldog in negotiations. When I sat in his polished mahogany office and laid out the story, sliding the eviction notice and the life estate agreement across his desk, his expression went from one of professional sympathy to a focused, predatory calm. He read the life estate agreement first, his finger tracing the lines of text. He held it up to the light as if checking a banknote for authenticity. "This is very well drafted," he murmured, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "Your mother was a smart woman." Then he read the quitclaim deed and the eviction notice. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. "Mr. Anderson," he said, leaning back in his chair, "your sister has made a catastrophic error. This quitclaim deed isn't worth the paper it's printed on. In trying to secure the property, she has engaged in elder fraud and conveyance without authority. Not only will we be able to stop the eviction, but we have grounds to countersue for legal fees, emotional distress, and potentially have her investigated for her actions." The word countersue was music to my ears. It wasn't just about defense anymore, it was about offense. "So what's our plan?" I asked. "Our plan," Thorne said, leaning forward, "is to do nothing for now." He explained the strategy, which mirrored my own instincts perfectly. We would not respond to the eviction notice. We would not contact Chloe or her lawyers. We would let the 30-day clock run down. Her lawyers would then have to file for a formal eviction hearing in court. "She's expecting you to either pack up and leave or to call her begging," Thorne explained. "She's not expecting a silent legal ambush. We'll let her do all the work, spend the money, and file the paperwork. And at the hearing, when she's standing before a judge feeling completely triumphant, we will present this." He tapped the life estate agreement with his pen. "We will not only get the eviction thrown out, but we will publicly expose her fraud. We will file a motion to invalidate the quitclaim deed and have the title immediately restored to your mother's name, subject to your life estate. We will make her actions a matter of public record." It was a brilliant, ruthless plan. It appealed to my desire for justice, not just revenge. It wasn't just about winning, it was about proving in a court of law what Chloe had done. The next 3 weeks were the most difficult of my life. I had to live a lie. I had to pretend to be a defeated man. I began to pack some boxes, deliberately leaving them in the hallway where Chloe might see them if she drove by. I let the lawn get a little overgrown. I had to create the illusion that I was preparing to leave. Every day was a performance. Inside, I was a coiled spring of anticipation and anxiety. I focused on Mom. I didn't tell her about the court case or the eviction. It would only confuse and distress her. Instead, I filled our days with peace. We spent more time in the garden, we looked through old photo albums, and I read her favorite books aloud, just as she had done for me when I was a child. These quiet, precious moments were the fuel for my fight. This was what I was protecting, not just a building, but my mother's peace of mind, her right to live out her days in dignity and familiarity. During this time, Thorne and his team were busy. They filed our official response to the court under seal, so Chloe's lawyers wouldn't see it until the hearing. They prepared our countersuit. They subpoenaed the notary who had witnessed the signing of the quitclaim deed. Thorne wanted to question them about my mother's state of mind at the time of the signing. He was building a fortress of a case around us. The day before the court date, a final notice was taped to our door, this one a stark, red-bordered document confirming the eviction hearing. It listed the date, time, and courtroom number. This was it. The final move in Chloe's game. She had no idea I was about to flip the entire board. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the quiet, sleeping house, touching the walls, the furniture, the door frames that marked my height as a child. Every object held a memory. This was the house my father had filled with love and laughter. This was the sanctuary I had tried to maintain for my mother. My sister saw it as an asset to be liquidated, a stepping stone to a bigger portfolio. She had forgotten that a home's true value can't be appraised. I stood in the doorway of my mother's room. She was sleeping soundly, a peaceful expression on her face. In her sleep, the lines of worry and confusion smoothed away, and she looked like the mother I remembered from my childhood. My resolve hardened into something unbreakable. I wasn't just fighting for my rights. I was fighting for her memory, for her dignity, for the promises my father made and the legacy he left behind. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, Chloe wouldn't be facing her sentimental little brother. She would be facing a son who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. And she was going to learn what the word consequence really meant. The courtroom was a cold, impersonal space, all drab beige walls and dark wood. It smelled faintly of floor polish and anxiety. I sat beside Marcus Thorne at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I wore a suit for the first time in years, feeling like an imposter in my own skin. Across the aisle, Chloe sat with her lawyer, a slick-looking man with expensive shoes and a condescending smirk. She looked confident, powerful in her tailored gray suit. She glanced over at me once, a flicker of pity and annoyance in her eyes, before turning back to confer with her lawyer in a low whisper. She thought this was a formality, the final piece of paperwork to dispose of her inconvenient brother. The judge, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes named Judge Miller, entered and the proceedings began. Chloe's lawyer stood up and presented their case. He spoke in a smooth, practiced tone, painting a picture of a loving, responsible daughter forced to make a difficult decision. He presented the quitclaim deed, signed and notarized as indisputable proof of ownership by his client's trust. He spoke of my mother's unfortunate cognitive decline and how Chloe had stepped in to responsibly manage her assets to ensure her future care. He portrayed me as an unemployed, emotional son living rent-free, obstructing a perfectly reasonable plan to provide for an ailing parent. Every word was a calculated lie, a twisting of the truth that made my blood boil. I squeezed my hands together, forcing myself to remain silent just as Thorne had instructed. And so, Your Honor, the lawyer concluded with a flourish, we are simply asking the court to enforce the legal owner's right to their property and grant the eviction. Judge Miller looked over the quitclaim deed, her expression unreadable. She then turned her gaze to our table. Mr. Thorne, your response. Marcus Thorne rose slowly, a picture of calm authority. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Aaron Anderson, does not dispute that his sister, Ms. Chloe Anderson, obtained a quitclaim deed from their mother. What we do dispute, he said, his voice rising with theatrical gravity, is the validity of that deed. We contend it was obtained through fraudulent means, and more importantly that their mother, Mrs. Helen Anderson, did not possess the legal authority to make such a transfer in the first place. Chloe's lawyer let out a short, scoffing laugh. Objection, Your Honor, that's a baseless accusation. It's not an accusation, Your Honor, Thorne countered smoothly. It's a statement of fact which we are prepared to prove. He walked to the clerk and handed over a file. We would like to present into evidence a legally binding document. It is a life estate agreement signed 8 years ago by Mrs. Helen Anderson and my client. As the clerk handed the document to the judge, I watched Chloe's face. She leaned forward, whispering to her lawyer, a confused frown appearing on her brow. They had no idea what was coming. Judge Miller spent a long moment reading the document. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Finally, she looked up, her sharp eyes moving from the document to Chloe. Ms. Anderson, the judge said, her voice now edged with steel, were you aware of this agreement when you had your mother sign the quitclaim deed? Chloe stood up, flustered. I know, Your Honor, I've never seen that before. It must be some old, forgotten thing. It doesn't look forgotten to me, Judge Miller said coolly. It looks like a notarized, legally binding contract. Mr. Thorne, please proceed. Thorne laid out the terms of the agreement for the court, his voice clear and precise. He explained that the life estate granted me the right to live in the home for life and explicitly prohibited my mother from transferring the property without my consent. Therefore, Your Honor, the quitclaim deed Ms. Anderson coerced from her ailing mother is fundamentally invalid. Mrs. Anderson could not give away a right she had already legally signed over to her son. The smirk was gone from the face of Chloe's lawyer. He was now shuffling through his papers, his face pale. Chloe was staring at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning fury. The trap had been sprung. Thorne wasn't finished. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have the sworn testimony of the notary who witnessed the signing of the quitclaim deed. He gestured to the back of the courtroom where a nervous-looking woman was sitting. She is prepared to testify that Ms. Anderson told her that her mother was perfectly lucid and that this was what she wanted. She is also prepared to testify that Mrs. Anderson seemed confused, disoriented, and repeatedly asked what she was signing. This was not a responsible act of asset management. This was predatory elder fraud. Chloe's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, this is a character assassination. Sit down, counselor, Judge Miller snapped. She looked at Chloe, her gaze filled with contempt. Ms. Anderson, you came into this court asking to evict your brother from the home where he serves as the primary caregiver for your disabled mother. You did this based on a deed you obtained from her after her dementia diagnosis, a deed that is invalid because of a prior agreement you claim to have known nothing about. An agreement that protects your brother's right to live in the home precisely because he is her caregiver. The optics here are, to put it mildly, appalling. Chloe sputtered, but the house, it's for her care, the money. The money, the judge interrupted. Or the profit, your brother is providing her care in her own home for free. You seem to be the one trying to monetize her. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed the shattering of Chloe's scheme. The motion for eviction is denied with prejudice. The court finds the quitclaim deed dated August 15th to be invalid due to the pre-existing and binding life estate agreement. The title of the property at 212 Oak Street remains with Mrs. Helen Anderson, subject to the terms of said life estate. Furthermore, I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office and Adult Protective Services for investigation into potential elder fraud. It was over, we had won. It was a total, unconditional victory. Chloe stood frozen, her face a mask of utter shock and humiliation. Her lawyer was already packing his briefcase, avoiding her gaze. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost tangible. She didn't say a word. She just turned and walked out of the courtroom, a disgraced figure stripped of her power and her pride. As Thorne and I walked out into the hallway, the weight of the past month lifted from my shoulders. It was more than just relief, it was vindication. She never saw it coming, I said, a shaky laugh escaping me. Arrogance is a blindfold, Aaron, Thorne said, clapping me on the shoulder. She was so sure of her own cleverness she never bothered to look in the attic. Now let's go home. Walking back into the house after the court hearing felt like taking the first breath after nearly drowning. The air itself seemed lighter. The oppressive weight of the eviction notice, which had haunted every room for a month, was gone. I walked through the familiar hallways, running my hand along the cool plaster of the walls. It was still ours. It was safe. Mom was in the living room, arranging a bouquet of flowers from the garden. She looked up and gave me a soft, gentle smile. "Oh, there you are," she said. "Did you have a nice walk?" In her world, I had just been out for a stroll. The courtroom, the lawyers, the near disaster of losing our home, none of it had touched her, and for that I was profoundly grateful. My silence had been a shield, protecting her from a battle she never should have had to fight. "The best walk, Mom," I said, kissing the top of her head. The aftermath of our victory unfolded over the following weeks. The first official letter to arrive was from the court, a dry but beautiful document formally voiding the quitclaim deed. I framed it and hung it in my office. It was a reminder that sometimes the pen is mightier than the sword, especially when it's used to sign the right contract. The second set of consequences was for Chloe. The investigations by the district attorney and adult protective services were thorough. While they ultimately didn't press criminal charges, citing the complexity of proving intent given her power of attorney, the professional fallout was devastating for her. Her firm launched its own internal review. A financial advisor who engages in questionable dealings with their own mother's assets is not a good look. She was suspended, then quietly let go. The Chloe Anderson who had built her identity on a foundation of financial acumen and ruthless ambition had that foundation crumble beneath her. She tried to contact me once a few months later. A single, bitter text message appeared on my phone. "I hope you're happy in that rotting old house. You've ruined my life over it." I stared at the message, feeling not anger but a deep, sorrowful pity. She still didn't get it. She still thought the fight was about the house, about wood and nails and property values. She couldn't comprehend that the fight was about Mom, about dignity, about promises made and promises kept. I typed a simple reply: "The house isn't rotting, it's healing. I hope you can too." Then I blocked her number for good. Our relationship, whatever was left of it, was over. Some things are too broken to be fixed. With the legal battle behind me, I could finally focus on the future. The countersuit Thorne had filed was settled out of court. Chloe's lawyer, eager to make the whole mess disappear, agreed to a settlement where Chloe would pay all of my legal fees and a significant sum for emotional distress. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. I didn't use the money for a vacation or a new car. I invested it back into the house. I hired a contractor, a friend of my father's, to fix the rickety porch railing Chloe had once criticized. We put on a new roof. We renovated the downstairs bathroom to make it safer and more accessible for Mom. With every repair, every fresh coat of paint, it felt like we were not just fixing the house, but healing the wounds of the past few months. We were washing away the stain of Chloe's greed and reinforcing the home with love and care. Life settled into a new rhythm, a more peaceful one than before. My business thrived. The story of what happened had spread through our small community, and I found myself with a wave of new clients who admired what I had done for my mother. It turned out that standing up for your family was good for business. Mom's dementia continues its slow, inevitable progression. There are more bad days than good ones now. Sometimes she looks at me and asks where Aaron is. On those days, my heart still breaks, but I just hold her hand and say, "He's right here, Mom, and he's not going anywhere." I know our time together in this house is finite, but because of a dusty box in an attic and the foresight of a loving mother from years ago, I know that I will be able to keep my promise. I will be here to care for her, to hold her hand through the fog, until the very end, in the comfort and safety of the only home she has ever known. The house is quiet now, save for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It's a sound that has measured out the moments of my entire life. It ticked through my childhood laughter, my teenage angst, my father's last days, and my sister's betrayal. And now it ticks through these quiet evenings with Mom. It's the steady heartbeat of our home. And thanks to a forgotten promise on a faded piece of paper, it's a heartbeat that will continue for all the years I have left. The echoes in these hallways are finally at peace.